Wander to Greater Paths is a Southern Baptist megachurch that boasts a regular Sunday attendance of 26,000 congregants. They had everything: inspired preaching, robust community outreach, and even a talented mime ministry. Led by Pastor Lee Curtis Childs and his wife, Trinity Childs, played by Sterling K. Brown and Regina Hall, this church hoped to continue its dominance until a scandal rocked the pews and decimated its membership. Now, the pastor and first lady find themselves in street ministry, attempting to rebuild their church membership, asking us to honk for Jesus, save your soul. I'm Ronald Young Jr., and I'm on the couch. All right, this is Ronald, and I am on the couch after watching Honk for Jesus, Save Your Soul. Honk for Jesus, Save Your Soul. Written and directed by Adamma, starring Regina Hall and Sterling K. Brown. You can get a full list of the cast by clicking on the link in our show notes. This movie is available in theaters, I believe, and also on Peacock. I watched it on Peacock. That's why I'm on the couch. Now, this movie is about Sterling K. Brown and playing a pastor and Regina Hall playing a first lady, and they are in charge of a mega church. I believe it is in Atlanta. I'm not certain. Probably should have noted that detail. Don't think it was that important, but it was just an American black mega church. And they are the pastor and the first lady. I believe his name was Lee Curtis Childs and his wife, Trinity Childs. Now, I should have said that backwards because this is a movie about a pastor and his wife, but really I think a lot of this movie focuses on the first lady, and I think that was wise for them to do that. I think it was a smart move for them to make. The plot to this movie goes, there's a pastor and a first lady who are in charge of this church called the, I want to say Wander the Road Ministries, or some sort of very unique churchy name. And there is a scandal that takes place that is slowly revealed over the course of the movie. And as a result, this church, which had 26,000 members attending at one point, dropped down to just 5. With all of their members going to a competing church, I'm saying competing with air quotes, across town. And that congregation was beginning to grow as everyone left this original church for scandal. And it follows this pastor and this wife as they attempt to rehabilitate their image and reopen their church and invite all of their parishioners to come back. Now, I just want to say straight off the top, the plot in this movie is really only there to support the performances of Sterling K. Brown and Regina Hall. And I think the plot is fairly basic and almost in some ways completely unnecessary. I don't even know if I needed to know exactly what the scandal was in order for the performances to play out. And I think the director and writer is very aware of that in this movie. Now, full disclosure, I'm a church guy through and through, been in church the majority of my life, now digitally, but for the majority of my life, I've been physically in person in church. And, you know, when this movie starts, I really appreciated a lot of the theater, the time that they took to really address the theater that is in church. At first, I thought that the movie was simply an indictment of the facade of church culture, the cover of church culture. There's a lot of ways in which there's a lot of language that's used in church in order to kind of not talk about the problems directly or not talk about issues directly, but kind of talk around them in a way that, a lot of the millennial generation is kind of tired of. There's a lot of, except for when it comes to the LGBTQ community, there's not a lot of direct language surrounding condemnation of the wrongs that the church, the organization, kind of continues to perpetuate upon people. And I think this movie does a very good job of demonstrating that, talking about the facade. There's a lot of, as it opens, it kind of shows us this mega church, and it shows us the inside of it, how big and beautiful it is, and all of the, the fine things that they have, the cars, the clothes. They have a walk-in closet inside of the church, which is just wild. And the pastor has this big house, and they're very kind of, just very kind of vague about how they're getting the money, and it governs into his sermons. He's talking a lot about prosperity gospel and how, he got what he had because he worked hard and the Lord favored him, and I think what the problem, upon first glance, watching the movie, I thought that it was just kind of going to be a scathing takedown just of church culture. And it kind of goes beyond that. It gets a lot more specific than that. It's not just talking about church culture, but in a lot of ways, it's talking about men at church and power in churches, and specifically Black men and the relationships with them and Black women in these environments. And there's ways in which that this movie covers that, both in the disgraced couple, as well as there's another couple that owns the rival church across town. It kind of demonstrates it in that couple as well. It kind of demonstrates to them them being on the rise, whereas Sterling K. Brown and Regina Hall are on the fall. It kind of demonstrates how these dynamics, power dynamics, play out in these couples when you are a spiritual leader of a worship community. So it's let's get to the performances. I mean, this is a performance-driven movie. I think that this is a movie that both lead actors should be nominated for an Oscar, if not just Regina Hall. But both of them, I think, should be nominated. But if only one of them does, it should be Regina Hall. We'll start with Sterling K. Brown. He does a very good job of playing the showman preacher, the dramatic preacher that does a lot of theater. Everything is overdone, but he also revels in the fine things. He revels in the things that he gets as a result of ministry, and he revels in what the power that he has as a result of ministry, and he deludes himself. He lies to himself first before he lies to everyone else, thinking that he deserves it. And anytime that he breaks character, and when I say character, I mean the character of the doting man of faith. Whenever he breaks that character, it's really just to express frustration about something that he believes that he's entitled to. And it's kind of when something's not going his way, if he's not getting something he's entitled to, that's when you see the cracks in the facade. And I think he does a very good job of that, but that is very familiar to us. We're very familiar with the showman, with the disgraced man, with the man that's kind of like trying to hold it together, convince us that he has it under control. We've seen a lot of narratives like that. That's not unfamiliar here. But Sterling K. Brown does a very good job of selling it. As the scandal becomes unveiled, there's a very creepy scene that happens later on a basketball court between Sterling K. Brown and the sound guy of the documentary that they're filming. I'm sorry. One of the main plot points here is that there is a film crew that is documenting the air quotes comeback of this ministry. And so one of the sound guys in the documentary, one of the sound guys working for the documentary, actually has an interaction with Sterling K. Brown that is proved to be very, very creepy, to kind of demonstrate the types of interactions that got Sterling K. Brown scandalized in the first place. The second part is his interactions with his wife. you can tell that this is a marriage of people that have known each other for a very long time. They have a way of talking to each other and being very aware of the issues in their marriage and in their relationship and in the ministry without directly confronting those issues. So there's a way in which they talk to each other, have tone, and they kind of like engage with one another without actually confronting the issues that they're actually having. And this is all kind of conveyed. It kind of comes to a head in a very uncomfortable sex scene between the two of them, in which they're both like really acting well in the ways they're kind of carrying out everything. Now, Sterling K. Brown, again, great actor, did a wonderful job in this movie. He is only eclipsed by Regina Hall, who I think had to walk a much tighter rope to portray the role that she's playing. And there's one piece of exposition that is said by the two people, the pastor and wife of the rival church across town, where they mention that Regina Hall's character filed then unfiled for divorce because of what happened with the scandal that happened with Sterling K. Brown. I really enjoyed that, because what we see here is when we get there, the filing and unfiling of divorce has already happened. And Regina Hall is playing the part of the doting wife and the attentive first lady. And there's a scene early in the movie where she's just sitting in the church pew and staring off into space. And then she kind of realizes that the cameras are on her, and she kind of straightens up as if to say, oh, I'm ready to now appear on film. But you can already tell that the depth of which she's going to kind of reach down and so what she's playing is a character who has been grossly wronged by her husband, And she has every right to have walked away. But she also has kind of been like entranced by this lifestyle that they lead, by the big house, by leading the ministry, by being a leader, by the fine things that they have. She is also into all of those things. So as much as she is a victim, and as much as she's a victim and she's kind of in this situation and under duress because of the things that he has done, she's also complicit in the charade, in the prosperity gospel charade, the kind of that they're preaching to all of the people around them. There's a scene in which she is in the mall and she runs into one of her former parishioners, Sister Donetta, and there's just it's a beautifully played by her and the actor that plays Sister Donetta, in which they're kind of just going back and forth to each other and saying, "Bless your heart, oh bless your heart. Oh, you're looking well," but they never hug. They never touch each other, but they kind of talk in this way that if you're there in person, you're like, "Ooh, that was chilly." But for any other person looking at this interaction, they're like, "It was perfectly nice." They're perfectly nice to each other. But you can tell from tone and dialogue, and again, this has to be well acted, not just well written. It has to be well acted in order for them to fully carry this off. And all the portions in which we're focused on Trinity, which is, again, the pastor's wife, anytime that we're focused on her, it is a much better movie. When we're talking about the burden that she is basically carrying for this man, but also because of her own, proclivities for fine culture, for the good things, we're looking at the balance that she's walking. Regina Hall plays this very well because there's a nuance that happens here. The movie starts off and feels more like a straightforward comedy before it kind of really starts to dip its toe into pretty dark themes. As the scandal comes more forward, the darker the movie becomes and the less funny it is as it carries on. Again, as someone who's been a part of a church for a long time, and I've seen various scandals here and there, both in my church and in other churches, none of this felt completely and entirely unfamiliar. None of it did. It felt like everyone in the film kind of did their homework, which I really appreciated. And there's a lot of choices made, especially with the interactions between Sterling K. Brown and Regina Hall, that I feel like create for a much richer and enjoyable movie. The only drawbacks I would say was that and I guess it didn't really need to be plot heavy. It's really driven by characters and performance, way more than plot. And most of you that listen to this podcast know that I'm not a character performance driven movie, although I can appreciate those movies and why they win awards, because if it's a feat of acting, then it deserves to be recognized for being a feat of acting. I don't necessarily think that this was a feat of writing or direction. In some cases, direction, actually more feat of writing than of direction, because I think you had two very good, very well-trained actors performing a very well-written script. Other than that, I don't know how much I liked this movie as a movie, if that makes any sense. I'm not recommending this to anyone to say like, oh man, you're really going to enjoy this, because I got very introspective watching this movie. And it was because I was drawn in by the nuances in the performance and the subject matter more than I was about anything happening along the lines of the plot, because plot points were really just there for the actors to kind of chew on as they kind of, went into each of their performances. There's one portion in the movie where the pastor is laying hands on a child at the church, and the spirit kind of breaks loose and they start speaking in tongues and all of that. And at one point it cuts away to the child doing a talking head with the documentary, and she just says, "I love good theater." And what happens next as the movie continues is really just a demonstration of the theater that continuously happens at this church and kind of in churches in a lot of ways. It is very dramatic. Like, I am a believer in the terms of the Spirit and being moved by the Spirit and the Holy Ghost and all of that. But there is a lot of theater that goes along with being especially with being in Black churches. And anyone that's been a part of a Black church knows that. Anyone that's been part of any sort of charismatic church should be able to understand what I'm saying here. If you're not a part of church, you might feel a disconnect from this movie because you're kind of watching it. There's some things that the movie kind of expects you to know walking in. It expects you to know it by sitting down already. And I can see why the audience score on this movie was rated lower than the critic score, because it seemed like there seems to be a disconnect between the type of movie this was. There were complaints about it not being funny enough or it taking the subject matter too seriously. And I would argue that this is a dramatic movie with comedy elements. I don't think this is a comedy. I think there's funny parts of the movie, and there are parts that I definitely laughed at. But other than that, this is not a Medea movie. This is not a Medea church scene. They're taking these characters very seriously, and we're kind of seeing the cracks of the facade come through both on the characters and the culture of the church that they're in. So, yeah, I think with that in mind, I didn't think it was a great movie. I would give the movie probably a 2.5, but I give the acting a 4.5, because I really think that at the end of the year, these performances should be considered amongst the best performances of the year thus far. And I want to be clear, I know that the Oscars has a problem with nominating Black people. This should be a layup. These performances were fantastic. Great. I was not a fan of the film, but I was a fan of the performances in the film, if that makes any sense. And I really have to separate the two, because I really do think that Sterling K. Brown and Regina Hall deserve some sort of accolades for what they've done in the movie. And I also think writing-wise, it was good. Other than that, because I think somebody had to actually take time to actually put the dialogue on the page. But other than that, I think the movie was just okay. I don't think I would watch it again, except to have another discussion about it, to be honest with you. But yeah, I think you could check it out. You should check it out. If you're going to check it out, you should check it out on Peacock, because you can sit on your couch, you can pause it. I think there's parts where the pacing is a little uneven and it's a little slow and it feels like it's dragging for a while. And it's not a very long movie. It's an hour and 43 minutes long, but at times it felt a little bit longer than that. So I think, and that has to do with the fact that like the plot is very thin. It's, but again, driven by performances. This had to be a feature-length movie. It was not going to make a very good television show, I don't think. And if you're only going to talk about the fallout, then it really does have to be performance-driven in a lot of ways. So, with that in mind, I think this is a 3-star movie. I wouldn't watch it again. But again, hopefully this is one I don't have to worry about for Oscar season in terms of reviewing, because both of these lead actors should be nominated for their performances. But with that, Leaving the Theater is a production of OhitsBigRon Studios. Thomas Tyra of Bias Studios mixes the show. Thank you, Tom. Show art from Heather Wilder. Theme music by the mysterious Breakmaster Cylinder. For more information about Honk for Jesus, Save Your Soul, check out our show notes. You can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at OhitsBigRon. That's at OhitsBigRon. You can find out more about this show and other OhitsBigRon Studios shows by following us on Instagram at OhitsBigRon Studios and on Twitter at OhitsBigRon Stew, STEW. Leaving the Theater will be back soon, but until then, I'll be here on the couch.